The only relevant credential worth mentioning for these self-talks is that I survived COVID-19. When you are tested COVID-19 positive, your academic accolades and professional accomplishments mean very little. Your religious affiliation and cultural heritage does not preclude you from being infected. The struggle to process a commodity that is freely available anywhere and everywhere becomes a struggle. I am talking about breathing oxygen, something that we have been doing without thinking since childbirth. Overwhelmed with the bombardment of social media posts, updates, news, statistics, and even sermons speaking about our heavenly home instead of proactive messages on how to live in the here and now, we're unintentionally conditioning us to embrace a state of helplessness. I called this learned helplessness. People wanted to live, I wanted to live, but the messages were preparing people to die. Now there is a time and place for everything, but this was not a time to be preparing people to die when they wanted to live. Do you remember the first few weeks of the pandemic and national lockdown wherever you were? Like others, I too posted videos of us exercising and enjoying family time. When the exercise videos and fun videos started getting scarce, it was a symptom of another crisis looming and already gaining a foothold: anxiety and stress. It was not funny anymore. That's when I decided to take proactive steps just in case. I began to reflect on the word onus. It means something that is one's duty or responsibility. In other words, you have to prove it. You must declare it or defend it. You must take ownership to make it happen if it will happen. It leans towards personal ownership and responsibility. At superficial glance, if you examine the word, it is made up of two words which aptly sums up its definition. It is made up of on and us, pronounced onus. For me, this was important because I realized that it was up to me what's going to happen to me. I know that there is no one size fits all in terms of treatment of any health condition. I'm not naive to this reality. In these self-talks, I'm not going to highlight the symptoms, medical interventions, efficacy of the vaccine, or how much I suffered. I am going to share with you the single determining factor that contributed and gave power to the overall efficacy of all interventions for my healing. This one factor is the defining one, the foundational, in my opinion. It is the hinge upon which every other intervention swings. I believe that regardless of the severity of the symptoms, even if you have pre-existing conditions, this factor is the tipping point. Think about it this way. If you fill a balloon with helium, it is going to rise up when you let it go, right? Why? Because it doesn't matter what color the balloon is. What determines whether it rises or not is not its surrounding. It's not the color, it's not the size or shape, but what it is filled with. In other words, what it is filled with determines whether it rises or not. I like to say that the spirit lifts and energizes the body. The focus of these self-talks is not on the impact of one's spiritual convictions on healing, nor the importance of medical interventions, nor the fact that everyone's case is unique. And the last thing that I don't want to do and will not do is tell you how I suffered and to what extent. Because for the simple reason, there is an overload of sharing about the suffering that this virus has caused. And I'd rather focus my self-talks on the healing rather than the virus. I do believe, without apology or any reservations whatsoever, that the main thing that is highlighted in these self-talks is the main thing, regardless of how seriously you were infected or affected or not, or how severe your preconditions were or are. It is applicable across the spectrum, regardless of your age, culture, health status, and is not dependent on how much of the symptoms you exhibit. I have tried it with many people. I want to keep the main thing the main thing. Everything that I talk about leads to the main thing or from the main thing. So these self-talks are very focused. The other aspects I will leave to another person to address for another time at another place. I don't mind being part of the discussion. I adopted a very cognitive approach to dealing with COVID-19. In the beginning, I thought of it as an enemy, and I still do. So you will hear me using war language sometimes. Any good war strategy requires knowledge about the enemy. I learned this from the book 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene. But the intelligence, that is scientists and medical practitioners, were also lost. They were unable to define and contain this enemy, which made it very difficult to come up with a strategy guaranteed to win the war against the virus. As the virus spread and people started reacting differently to it, and then there were different strains as time progressed, I realized that a war mentality was not enough. As the virus was changing its form and became more evasive, revealing its deadliness, I too began to change my approach about dealing with this enemy and began viewing this virus as a test. This is not a perfect illustration, but that's how I viewed it. Albeit a test of life and death. You could pass or fail. Unfortunately, in this case, failure meant death. For many people, the virus overtook them unawares, and sadly, we lost our loved ones. It was not their fault. We were just not prepared. When people started surviving the virus, family and friends were celebrating the victory with media posts of gratitude to God and prayers of their network and relationships. However, I was still not convinced. I spoke to many people. I conducted one too many funerals of loved ones whose lives were claimed by COVID-19. Secondly, of those who survived, their bodies were not restored to full capacity, especially the function of their lungs, because the virus primarily attacks the respiratory system. So in terms of viewing the pandemic as a test, some were passing the test, that is surviving, but the quality of the pass was not impressive, in my opinion. Doctors told patients who survived that battle and passed the test that it will take some time for their lungs to heal completely. And because this message came from experts in medicine, they were believed, and more than that, it was an expectation even before a diagnosis of COVID-19 positive. I am going to take an off-ramp in this self-talk, but get back on track in a moment with purpose. Now, I teach students how to study and advocate a holistic approach to learning instead of simply learning memorization techniques. Because what if you memorize an answer, let's say for an essay question, and in the exam room a totally different question is asked? To say that you will be overwhelmed is an understatement, because you will feel that and much, much more. My daughter and I advocate resilient learning. And I remember that in her speech at the launch of her book, Resilient Learning: Pursuing Academic Excellence, she referred to resilient learners as proactive thinkers and not mere reflectors of other men's thoughts. At another high school, Leandra, my daughter, referred to resilient learners as amphibious learning. At Blue Hills High School, she said, and I quote, "An amphibian is something that is suited and capable of living in water and land. When I say that resilient learning is amphibious learning, I mean that resilient learners are those who not only excel in academics, school, or university, but they also excel in life and relationships. She continued, and because they embrace the principles of resilient learning and life principles, they create a trajectory and path of excellence from school into life after school. The lessons you learn and the skills you acquire through resilient learning in high school will allow you to excel in both water and land, in school and out of school. I end quote. I decided to take that understanding and adopt a proactive approach with an amphibious learning mindset. I needed to apply principles from different domains that would make me amphibious figuratively. Firstly, I walked into the future. I pictured myself healthy after being diagnosed COVID positive, and then walked back into the present and then charted a simple but effective path towards the victorious end goal. The path was based on these two principles of resilient learning. I believed that the key to facing COVID-19 head-on was these principles. Earlier, I spent few weeks working at an accelerated pace, researching the best way to face this virus face to face without fear and trembling. In July 2020, yes, just over 12 months before I tested positive, I designed the course Equilibrium, Maintaining Mental and Emotional Well-Being During and After COVID-19. It was going to be my blueprint and modus operandi. It was my POA, plan of action, and default strategy. I prepared this online course for my family, but made it available to everyone online. I was determined that in the unlikely or likely event that I came into contact with the virus, I would be prepared. Any student in high school will tell you that the key to passing a test with excellence is beforehand preparation, before the test. And if COVID-19 was the test, then I wanted to, and I was going to pass with excellence. And if I wanted to pass with excellence, then I had to be prepared. And the online course, Equilibrium, Maintaining Mental and Emotional Well-Being During and After COVID-19, was my preparation. I adopted a proactive growth mindset and adopted an amphibious, resilient learning mindset. This is a personal conversation. And if anyone is watching, if you are watching, it can be yours as well. This is not a TED Talk or Josh Talk, but self-talk. Why self-talk, you may ask? What is the significance? And I wish you would listen carefully. In my study of learning how people think and act, in my study of psychology, I had to research a particular therapy called CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy focuses on changing the automatic negative thoughts that can contribute to and worsen physical and emotional difficulties, such as depression and including anxiety. These spontaneous negative thoughts have a detrimental influence on relationships and other aspects of our lives, including health. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, is a type of psychotherapeutic treatment that helps people learn how to identify and change destructive and disturbing thought patterns that have an overall negative influence. Through CBT, these thoughts are identified, challenged, and replaced with more objective, realistic thoughts. The underlying concept behind CBT is that thoughts and feelings play a fundamental role in behavior and restoration of equilibrium. The goal of cognitive behavioral therapy is to teach people that while they cannot control every aspect of the world around them, they can take control of how they interpret and deal with things in their environment proactively. Cognitive behavior therapy has become increasingly popular in recent years in the mental health profession. By becoming aware of the negative and often unrealistic thoughts that dampen their feelings and moods, people are able to start engaging in healthier thinking patterns, which in turn can accelerate, now get this, can accelerate the healing process, minimize long-term damage to the body by disease, and in some cases, prevent disease by taking proactive steps. CBT is sometimes referred to as self-talk therapy. CBT or self-talk therapy typically takes 4 steps. Number 1, identify troubling situations or conditions in your life. In my case, it was the fact that I was tested COVID-19 positive. I think that qualifies for a troubling situation. Number 2, become aware of your thoughts, your emotions, and beliefs about these problems. This may include observing what you tell yourself about an experience, your self-talk, your interpretation of the meaning of a situation, and your beliefs about yourself, other people, and events. And that is exactly what I intended to do. Was it going to be easy? No, but I had to try and hold nothing back. Number 3, identify negative or inaccurate thinking. To help you recognize patterns of thinking and behavior that may be contributing to your problem, you are encouraged in this therapy to pay attention to your physical, emotional, and behavioral responses in different situations. This I had to carefully monitor, because when you are infected, it is very easy to succumb to inaccurate thinking. And finally, number 4, reshape negative or inaccurate thinking. Now, this was tough, but it required discipline and commitment. It required faith, it required hope, and it required a touch of creativity. And that is the purpose of self-talks. I survived COVID-19 because of my self-talks before, during, and after.
COVID-19 disrupted the world as we knew it. Don't let COVID-19 get the better of you. Take proactive steps to protect yourself against the negative mental and emotional effects of COVID-19. You don't have to feel overwhelmed, powerless, or incapacitated. Register for equilibrium, maintaining mental and emotional well-being today. Learn the art and skill of maintaining mental and emotional well-being. This is your first and best investment post-COVID-19. Show COVID-19 who's the boss. Bounce back